Hey there, macro folks. This is Mr. Hooker. This is income and expenditures video number 4, the final video. So this is going to be the shortest of the 4 videos. There's not much left. So let's roll with what we got. So multiplier process and inventory adjustment. If there's a shift in planned aggregate expending, what happens? In our model, there's only two possible sources of the shift. One's a change in planned investment spending. The other is a shift in the aggregate consumption function. So basically, only two things can happen to start this. Change in planned investment can occur because of the change in the interest rate, which we hit the easy button earlier and said that thing was fixed. So in our model, that ain't happening. The other is a shift in the aggregate consumption function, and change in the vertical intercept A can occur because the change in aggregate wealth, let's say house prices rise significantly. So there's a couple of things that can happen, um, but that's the way that works out for us. So here we are. Uh, Real GDP before and after autonomous spending increases by 400, with the MPC remaining at 0.6. Real GDP 0 to 4,000. Planned AE before the autonomous change 800 to 3,200. After the change, now it's 1,200 to 3,600. And so as it goes up by 400, you notice that we didn't just change our equilibrium by 400, we changed our equilibrium by 1,000. Okay, this is important to note. We didn't just move equilibrium by 400, we moved equilibrium by 1,000. So why does that happen? That is because of the multiplier, ladies and gentlemen. So we were initially at equilibrium right there at point E1. So the autonomous increase shifts the planned AE upward by 400. Uh, so let's move that up. So we move up by 400 to 800, from 800 to 1,200, and so that happens. Um, Firms increase production. The economy reaches a new income expenditure equilibrium at point E2. So there we go. That's like that right there. So we were there, we've gone up, and now we're out here at E2. So why is that? Well, that's because of the multiplier. Now, so basically, we have the change in AAE, which represents an autonomous change in the AE planned, and the change in Y equals the change in Y2, it equals Y2 minus Y1, and the subsequent change in income expenditures. So the multiplier, so that change in Y is the multiplier times the change in AAE, and that's the 1 over 1 minus the MPC times the change in AAE. So we have an MPC of 0.6. So 1 over 0.4 gives you your multiplier times my change, which is 400. And that is what we're going to do with that. So the MPC is less than 1. Um, so each round of increases in disposable income leaks out into savings. And so increases in real GDP diminish from one round to the next. So the increase in real GDP is kind of negligible, and the economy converges to a new income expenditures equilibrium GDP. So, what do we have here? I can give you that whole thing. 1 divided by 0.4. So our multiplier was 2.5 times the 400, and that's 1,000. So there we go. All right. So when the planned spending does not equal the aggregate output, That difference shows up in changes in inventories, and firms just respond to the inventory changes and move real GDP to the point at which real GDP and planned aggregate spending are equal. And that's why changes in inventories are the leading indicator of future economic activity. So changes in inventory are a big deal. Uh, they'll tell you what's going on. And so there's a thing called a cardboard index out there because all 75 to 80% of things are packed in cardboard boxes. So um, if we're making stuff, we're putting in a cardboard box. And so one way to track how things are going in the economy is to track how many cardboard boxes these people who make stuff are actually ordering. Because if they plan to make a bunch, they're going to order more cardboard boxes. If they don't think they're going to be making a lot, they actually don't order as many cardboard boxes. So one of those sites that I put in that pre-class discussion thing actually had an article about that where like 9% of all the cardboard box factories closed up this past year. Over the last 12 months, they actually like the orders have fallen so much over the past 12 months that 9% of all the cardboard box factories have just like gone away. Kind of interesting how that works. So interesting. So paradox of thrift. It's an interesting thing. Um, it's not as big a deal. It's one of those things where it's a thing. Paradox of thrift, crowding out the income effect. Three things that we talk a lot about in economics classes, but aren't as big a deal as we like to make them out to be because they're really cool in an economics class, but in the real world, they're just not a thing. Um, so the idea here is the outcome of many individual actions can generate result that's different from and worse than the simple sum of the individual actions. So paradox of thrift says this, like understand it's a great idea that you save as an individual. Like you should have a savings plan. Probably ought to have a savings account, a retirement account, like something for retirement that is counted as savings in economics and and in finance too. I think well, finance may separate it out into two different things, but it is counted that way, right? But if you had someone that said, um, "Hey, everybody needs to save 15% of their income," if that were to happen, it would not really go as well as people might think. So if everybody were forced to save 15% of their income, we really would not, it would not increase saving because that increase in saving actually, you have to assume that disposable income is a constant and you have disposable income Y sub D is equal to C plus S because you have C plus S and C plus I. Remember, savings is equal to actual investment. And so C plus S is equal to C plus I. Um, and so in that sense, if savings goes up, that means that if disposable income is a constant and savings goes up, that means that consumption goes down. And if consumption went down, that means that firms didn't sell as much. And if they didn't sell as much in year one, that means that in year two, they're just going to lay people off. When they lay people off, income falls. So you still have to say you're forced to save 15%. So you're still saving 15%, but now you're saving 15% of less. And then you get to the idea that people are still not spending as much, and firms realize this, and so they lay more people off. But you still have to save 15%. So you save 15% of less still. And so round three, you're still saving 15%. It's less than it was in round two. Consumption falls again. Firms are like, what the heck is going on? We're going to lay more people off. So they lay more people off, and income falls for a third time. All right. And so basically, people are still forced to save 15%. Incomes continue to fall. And you can see where this is going. This just continues to circle the drain until people realize this isn't working. And when you look back at it, you saved 15% consistently, but you ended up saving less than you would have because you saved more of a lesser amount. So it just becomes a thing over time. Um, so it leaves consumers and producers off worse off than if they hadn't been, if they would have been if they hadn't cut their spending. So if you just left well enough alone and let people save the rate that they want to, it wouldn't have happened. So the forced saving is what messes that up. In the real world, countries have international trade. How do you deal with the exports and imports in the model? Exports are like an increase in autonomous spending because income earned from exports is a source of spending on domestically produced goods and services. And foreign trade makes the multiplier process weaker. So when consumer spending changes, part of that change leaks into imports, which reduces the multiplier. Um, and part of that fall depends on the MP and the marginal propensity to import. So how much of an additional dollar spending falls on imports rather than domestic goods. So that's how that works. So there's also the idea of economic interdependence. So trade links between economies are one reason the business cycles are often international in scope. We really depend on other people nowadays. The economy is global. You can't really separate us. So many countries tend to have recessions and recoveries all about the same time. Believe that's it. It is. Y'all have a great day. We'll talk to you later.